So thank you very much. Thank you, Trisha, for the introductory words. And I am Hungarian, so my English pronunciation is also Hungarian. So I'm sorry for it, but maybe it's sometimes more understandable. Yeah, and we used to call it in Hungary that we speak Hunglish. So English and Hungarian, Hunglish. But I try my best, of course, to talk as good as possible. Yeah. So the topic is, as you can see, shamanism, which is one of my favorite research topics, and I am involved in field experience, so that's why I hope that you will think that I'm a reliable scholar and not only one who imagines something about this phenomenon called shamanism. Yeah, and first of all, let me introduce my main point, the main points of my presentation. Well, I'm not going into the details about the history of the Mongolian shamanism, just to give some snapshots about the idea what is this phenomenon in historical and ethnographic sources means. And I'd like to introduce you also briefly my field research. And then I go to the main topic, the difference between black and yellow shamanism, which is one of my research topics, as I have mentioned. I'm going to introduce it through two case studies based on my field investigation in the 90s, and this is important. I will return to it. Why is it so important that it happened in the 90s? So this is the brief schedule of my presentation, and now we can go on my slides further. Am I understandable for you, for all of you? Thank you very much. I can talk very loud because I'm an experienced teacher, so I really, sometimes I used to teach 100, 150 or even more students, so it's no problem for me to talk loudly. So as you can see, and I know that all of you are aware where the Mongols live, and just let me show some points that according to my understanding and my research, which parts shamanism was preserved. So in Mongolia, in the Darkhat territory, in the Oirat territory, in Buryatia, around the Baikal lake, and in Inner Mongolia, among the Khorchins, and in the Daur territory. Currently, 2018, yes, this year, there are shamanism everywhere, among the Kalmyks, the only European Mongolian people, and among all Mongolian people you can see here, and of course in Xinjiang and the Qinghai and Gansu regions of China. So this map was taken from my book devoted to the mythology of Mongols. So something about the history. Yeah, in the historical sources, we have evidences on shamanism. For example, in the Secret History of the Mongols, the well-known Amic source from the 13th century, all of you know very good, very well, the story of the famous mediator, religious specialist. We might call him a shaman, called Tep-Tengeri, whose name means the above sky or sky of skies or heavenly deity or so on. Of course, there are no images from the 13th century, so I took one from the Deviant art because I don't know why, but if you go on the internet, look at the Deviant art, you will find a lot of pictures about Tep-Tengeri, a lot. And they are very fine, as you can see, so I suggest you to see. how people, contemporary people, imagine Teptengeri looked like. And the other important kind of source are the codes. The codes as the Ichtads, the Great Code issued in the 17th century. And from the 17th century onward, there are lots of legal codes that mention the shamans. These codes are politically supporting Buddhism, and that's why they try to press to the periphery shamanism. I have studied this particular one and the Oirat version of this code, the Western Mongolian Oirat version. That's why I show this one, but there are more, of course, which contain articles about the shamans' activity. So, and concerning, so these were the amic sources. It means the previous ones written in Mongolian and written by Mongols. The Attic sources, as you know, which are also particularly interesting because how a foreigner, how an outsider can see what the Mongols look like and what the Mongolian shamanism is like. So one of the 13th century sources, all of them mention, vannak itt még előszékek, úgyhogy gyertek ide nyugodtan. All of them mention several phenomena connected to shamanism. I choose Giovanni di Piano Carpini, who wrote the famous story of Mongols, whom we call the Tatars. And there are lots of versions of it, and I put here for your convenience that you can find it in English translation on the internet. And you can pick out some more fragments also connected to shamanic phenomena. So if you don't mind, let's see a little bit in detail this part from this very interesting source. So the Tatars believe in one God, whom they think is the creator of all things visible and invisible, and they believe he gives rewards and punishments in this world. Even so, they do not worship him with praises or ritual. So this is one understanding and one interesting point of the Mongolian religious life. This is what we call now Tengrism, or believe in the sky, or believe in one God. So that's why the missionaries first thought that it is not hard work to mission the Mongols because they have a kind of monotheism. But let's see how he continues this paragraph. Nevertheless, they do have idols of felt made in the image of man, and they place these both sides of the doorway of a tent, and underneath it they put a thing of felt made in a shape of an adder. And they believe that these protect their flocks and are responsible for milk and offsprings. In fact, the Tatars make other idols of silk racks and honor these greatly. So now we can see this double nature of the 13th century Mongolian understanding of environment and Mongolian religious life, religious and the belief system. One is, according to my understanding, the religion of the elite, which is the sky belief. The other is also belongs to the notion, this notion also belongs to the religious system of the elite, but this was widespread among average people, and this is very important because this idol they name in the 13th century are the same what we call now Ongon, the spirit representation of shamans. Exactly, almost exactly the same, and as you can see, recorded in the 13th century. So this is one of the earliest Attic foreign sources from Giovanni Plano Carpini, a papal envoy who visited the Mongol court. A little bit later, we also have some evidences about shamanism, but some scarce data because, for example, Peter Simon Pallas, the famous Russian, yes, of course, he was not a Russian according to his origin, but in the Russian service, he had long journeys throughout Russia, Siberia, and among them in the territories of the Kalmucks. And he wrote his famous book, 2 volumes. This is a new edition, Sammlungen historischer Nachrichten über die mongolischen Völkerschaften. But in fact, it's only about the Kalmucks. And as you can see, this is 19th century, Buddhicized period of the Mongols, but we can still see such idols that you have seen here mentioned in the 13th century source. So these are the preliminaries, the historical and ethnographic preliminaries to our topic shamanism. And now I come to the Hungarians, yeah, because Hungarians were always interested in studying shamanism because, as you know, Hungarians were nomads and migrated from some parts, only some parts, probably from Inner Asia, the most parts from the Ural mountain to the present Hungary. And that's why we are interested in Mongolia, in nomadic culture, and also in shamanism as well. So one of the first researchers of Siberian and Mongolian shamanism from Europe was Vilmos Diószegi, who actually studied at the same department I come from ELTE University. And this is interesting, and this is a quite new topic for me, because I think, and not only me, but other scholars as well, other researchers as well, that during his fieldworks, it is the time of socialism, yeah? And during his fieldworks, where Badamhatan, Rinchen, Puruv, and also other native scholars could carry out fieldwork, was a relative freedom of carrying out shamanic activity. And what does it mean? All of you know that the persecution of monks started in the 30s, and they were almost completely destroyed all the Buddhist phenomena, while the shamans could practice, of course, secretly. Not all of them. We will see this from another slide of mine. But a relative freedom still we can suspect was during the socialism. While Diószegi visited several Mongolian groups, Hotogoid, Buryat, Darkhat shamans in 1960, and the famous Mongolian scholar, many of you know his name, Otkoni Puruv, was his interpreter, and that's why he started to collect and record shamanic narratives and objects, and became one of the foremost researchers of Mongolian shamanism. He's Diószegi, and people who are of Buryat origin or know or know better the Buryat shamanism and folklore. She is Sharakshinova and the daughter of Hangalov, very famous Buryat scholars and or Hungarian first researchers of shamanism. On the basis of his experience, Diószegi issued a very good field note, a diary, a kind of diary, but on a scientific or academic level, called Shamanismus in Hungarian. Unfortunately, it doesn't have any other translations, but you can get it from the internet in Hungarian if you are interested in. But this is something very curious and a very new one, and I'd like you to draw your attention that during his fieldwork, Diószegi collected shamanic objects from the field, and it was kept it is still kept in the Museum of Ethnography in Budapest, and last year Wilhelm Gábor, a colleague of mine, issued a catalogue, and this is shamanic objects of 50s and 60s from Mongolia and South Siberia. And now to my fieldwork. Unfortunately, these roots are not all of mine, unfortunately, because my students and my colleagues researched Eastern Mongolia, and this is the roots I visited. With my colleagues, some of them are here, and this was the shamanic research in Eötvös and in Oirats provinces during the 90s. And I would like to draw your attention that this is the time when the traditional shamanism was still alive, a vivid phenomenon. And then towards the end of the 90s, it has changed a lot. We will see some of its phenomena. Some of my works, some, only two, not some, only two. But if you are interested, many of my articles devoted to shamanism you can find on Academia Edu with my name, but not all of them. Of course, there are some problems with rights, so I am afraid of put all of them, but many you can find here. So this bulky monograph is devoted to the mythology on written sources, based on written sources and on my field work, and it was issued in Stuttgart several years ago. And concerning my current topic, I issued an article, I published an article a couple of years ago, the first part. And as I have mentioned, Hungarians are particularly interested in shamanic phenomena, so that's why I find it very important, and this is one of my endeavors that I have to write also in Hungarian. So we have a series of books, as you can see, and many of you already have recognized she is Balgyr Otkon from the Darkhat tribe from Eötvös. And the other deity, I will introduce you in a couple of minutes later. And this is my last book. Oh, it's nothing to see, but it's not your fault. Probably the design is not the best one because it was written on green with red. It's not the best. It's not my choice. But this is my last book about the Mongolian shamanic phenomena in a historical context. I introduced my own research. And it's called in Hungarian, veszett farkas a hátasod, tűzkígyó az ostorod. It means that your mount is the rabid wolf and your whip is a fiery snake. It is in Mongolian, gal mogoy tasortangód, kálzó csonon huluktengód. This is a fragment from a famous Mongolian shamanic invocation. I am a philologist, yeah. So that's why I find important to introduce you the terminology and the text, some text of my research. So all of you know that the shaman, the male shaman, is called Bu, and it is also a general name for a shaman, and the male and female shamans are differentiated. So a female shaman is Otkon, in Buryat, Odigon, Idugan, and so there are several dialectal versions. And the shaman of high rank is called Zairen or Zairin. So this is the basic terminology. And now I go to the main focuses of my study about black and yellow shamans. So first of all, I'd like to offer you a distinction, how I distinct between the Buddhicized or yellow and non-Buddhicized or black shamanism. And talking about yellow shamans, it is still questionable when this term appeared. We know that at the beginning of the 20th century, a very famous Russian researchers, Boris Yakovlevich Vladimirtsov, already recorded this phenomenon, but that time the shamans called themselves shamans of Buddhist creed. No term like yellow shaman appeared. But when I started study shamanism, there were already some studies written by Sodnom, Gadam, Tsirin Sodnom Rinchen, and Badamhatan, and they, starting from the 50s, already mention this yellow shaman, which means the shamans whose rituals are Buddhicized. They use Buddhicized way of communication, Buddhicized text, and Buddhicized or Buddhist objects. And I like this study very much, written by Sodnom, who makes a very clear distinction in the textual tradition of the shamans, of black shamans, Harzugindótlag, and yellow shamans, Sárzugindótlag, and of course the mixture of both types of shamanism. So this is me. I don't know whether you recognize me or not. Yeah, something like this maybe. So I am sitting in not very proper way. I'm sorry, I was already tired, so that's why I know, of course, a woman should not sit this way. But I am working with the very famous shamaness Otgon Balgir in the Darkhat territory. And on the basis of my field work, I prepared an article. This is very small here, but you can find it on the internet on academia.edu. The shamaness, the performer. And I distinguished 9 main points how I can make a study about various shamanic activities. And the case studies. So first I start with the black shamanism. The black shamanism is devoted to those ongons, protector spirits, deities, which are not concerned with Buddhism. But this is not always true, because some deities, even in the black shaman's activity, are taken from Buddhism. But they lost the Buddhist characteristics or lost the Buddhist features. So the black shamans, here we can see the black shamans, Balgir's day ritual, and a typical, of course all of you know, a typical object of black shamans, a drumstick. And now let's see some evidences about Balgir. This is the living place where she and her family have nomadized in the Darkhat territory in Hövsgöl. And I had the chance, and I was very lucky to work with her, and had the chance to meet her 4 times during our field research, also together with Sambó Dorcs, professor who is with us from the Academy of Sciences, and he was considered as one of the best shamans of that time. And what is more important, that she kept the old tradition. As you can see, she was born in 1913, so she survived the socialism and could keep all those traditions that we can name, or we can call the real, I would say, real traditional Mongolian shamanism. Of course, all kinds of shamanism are real, but this is she kept a long-lasting tradition. She was visited by lots of researchers, of course, and she was famous for her abilities and prophecies as well. Another black shamaness from the Darkhat area, from Tsagan-Nor, the Darkhat, Tsagan-Nor territory, Bair. She was also a powerful shaman, as you can see on my slide, and she was able to turn the effect of curses. I made several times interview with her, and towards the end of the 90s, she moved to Ulaanbaatar and became partly an urban shaman. You know, the urban shamans who do not practice in the countryside change their activity, but she also belonged to those who could keep the old tradition as well. And now let's see, of course my slides are not so good to see because many of them were taken at night. So this is a main distinction in shamanic rituals, the day rituals and night rituals. The day rituals are for less powerful spirits, and the night rituals when a black shaman might, and traditionally only at night, she might wear the traditional cloak, the headgear, and use the drum. And this is the traditional cloak of Darkhat shamans. Of course, we could analyze what all the details of this shamanic garment means. So let's see the headgear, which is traditional among the Darkhats and in South Siberia. And this is a real mask. It has also an important meaning. So why she wears this mask, a human face. Of course, it is a kind of protection for the shaman because the harm of a spirit that arrives to the ritual place do not enter into the shaman's face, but into this mask first. So that's why the Darkhats call it also as a ritual objects that could belong to a warrior. So again, yeah, night rituals, scenes from night rituals. On the black side, Shamanes Bajir, and on the right side, Shamanes Bair. These were taken in situ, so I mean during rituals and in the Darkhat territory. If you cannot see properly the slides now, because these are scenes from a night ritual, you can, we can, I don't know, Trisha, we can put all the slides on your site. It's up to you, and yeah, and so I am agree, and of course I am very happy if more people can see or the results of our research. Again, the night ritual, it is interesting, and of course. We had the chance, and many of you who visited the shamanic rituals know this scene. This is when she calls a particular spirits kneeling down, and almost she hides herself into the drum, and the rhythm is very particular, and oh, it's very good. It's good. Thank you. Wow. We can see almost all the details, and so particular spirits requires particular movements and particular rhythm and particular text modules. And on the right side, this is very interesting, and this is very worth of studies, the shamanic altar, home altar, which can be seen only during the night ritual. And if you will see the previous slides on the internet side, you will see that during the day rituals, oh yeah, the next one is from this day rituals, which is less powerful, and the altar is hidden, covered. So you cannot see the ongons, the representations of the protector spirits, and the shaman might not. It is a taboo, a tser in Mongolian, that she cannot wear the cloak, the shamanic cloak and headgear during the day rituals, and might use only some of her objects. So this was the tradition. Of course, it has changed now. If you have visited shamanic rituals, you are the eyewitnesses that it has changed. This old taboo and the tser. Yeah, the day ritual quite different from the previous ones, and shaman use instead of drum, but it can be used during a night ritual as well, the Jews harp, as Bair does in her flat in Ulaanbaatar. And this is the chest for the shamanic objects and the altar with the representations of the ongons. Of course, you might know this famous type of divination. I wrote a very detailed article about types of divination among the Mongols. Not only shamans, but everyone can do it. Those who learn it can do it. So a scapula, this is scapulimancy, so shoulder blade divination. Of course, it has a bulky tradition of written texts in Mongolian and Tibetan as well, and there are several ways. This is the so-called pyromantic or pyromantic, yeah, way of divination with a sheep scapula carried out by Balgir. I can talk about it in detail later if you are interested. So this was the black shamanic activity. We could see the objects they use and the distinction of the rituals, the day and night rituals. Now we go to the yellow shamans. On the right side you can see Amarjargal from Eötvös province, and the famous Yama. Yes, her name was Yama Samgan in Oirat dialect, and her ongon representation of protector spirit. So we are in Eötvös province now, in Barunturu-Dzunturu districts, and in this district lives Amarjargal, a yellow shaman. That means that that her rituals are Buddhicized. You can see the headgear, I hope you can see, and I can explain that it has 5 skulls, what you know from Buddhist iconography and rituals, and she holds in her hand a Buddhist sutra, a text. But some other objects of her are shamanic. All the shamans might have shamanic mirror. She was an interesting personality, and she didn't want to recognize herself being a shaman, but was quite successful in healing. And the local people, the people of her district, made a mistake and considered her as an incarnation of Green Tara, a Buddhist deity, because the Eötvös province is famous by this incarnating Buddhist deity. And yes, she explains her objects, which is also very similar to the Buddhist ones. Here you can see the cap with 5 skulls and a Buddhist instrument, of course, yes, thank you. Instrument, and her mirror. Yeah, and now we go to another yellow shaman, again in Eötvös. So Amarjargal lived here. The other group of shamans, or a family, lived, yes, they are not there currently, unfortunately, in Narambulag and Malchin districts. So she is Cholon, yellow shamaness, here making divination with the Csinnigin Csolo with 41 pebbles and explaining how she makes libation, tatsal, for the local spirits. And his son, Hurulbátor, in Oirat dialect, Körülbátor. Here, this is very clear that what is the main distinction between black and yellow shamanism, the non-verbal communication of the shaman is clearly similar to that of the monks. Here on his knees he has a Buddhist sutra dedicated to Sitatapatra, in Mongolian Tsagansuhurt, a deity, a goddess, and prays like the monks, and do not have that movements what the black shamans have. And the Ongon representation is similar to the black shamans, can be similar to the black shamans as well. It contains, not very clear, but I hope you believe me when I explain, 1 crow and 9 snakes. And this is a word model. The crow means the upper world and the snakes the underworld. And it's also clear that this is a yellow shaman's object, because this is a rosary, a Buddhist rosary. And of course the hodag can be used by both yellow and black shamans as well. Actually Yama, the very powerful shamaness, migrated from Tuva into Mongolia. And my last slides are about the textual tradition and syncretism of Buddhism and shamanism. The famous deity in Eötvös, many of you know, and many of you have visited or will, I hope, visit his shrine and his cave. He is worshipped in a cave. And what I'd like to show you that he has already textual incense offering texts written by the lamas, by the monks. And it has also oral variants, and Amartargal, of the female shaman, had an invocation dedicated to this deity. And you can see on the basis of the text, here is the transcription and the translation. And what is it about? It is about how the shamaness calls the deity. And this is a kind of offering. Calling a deity already shows how and what the shaman offers him or her, in this case him. The clock, the garment the shamans wear, the headgear the shamans wear, the movement the shamans is moving are all kinds of non-verbal offerings and non-verbal communication with the spirits. And another one from a Darkhat text, just to compare with the previous yellow shamanic invocation. This is very famous, and the title of my book was taken from this text module. I call it text module. This module is the calling of the spirit, and you can see a very distinct difference that the metaphors and all the expressions are taken from a very unsimilar, not similar background. And finally, the last text fragment from mine. If you are familiar with the monks' texts, what the young monk learn, and in Buddhist monasteries they practice, this must be familiar for you. I transcribed the Oirat version. Narinzü neuzürt, younger bodan toktok, tütenigi nedil, kümnetürül bolj. And then the deity, Shaktip Manshir Borham Bibiyam, who the shamaness Cholon used this clearly Buddhist text when calling the human soul during the rituals in cemeteries, for example. And an example of syncretism, and this is my last short, brief topic. Yes, all of you who have already visited Eötvös, Aimag, and are familiar with this cave, which contains almost everything. This contains a fertility cult, the shamanic initiation, and Buddhist tradition as well, and has many aspects of various religious views and also aspects of belief systems. And it looks like this now. And when we visited, it was quite different. I hope you can see that first, when we visited during the 90s, there was, in the cave, there was a Buddhist warrior deity, and as you can see, many kinds of offerings were devoted to him. And the last example of this syncretism, or the mixture of various religious views, a tanka devoted to him, to Daindir. This is a typical tanka of warrior deities, but as you can see, a distinct difference is that he wears a shamanic crown, and it means that originally was recognized as shamanic deity by the Buddhism and integrated into the pantheon, the Buddhist pantheon. Yes, I made several interviews with shamans, and I chose an only part from one of my interviews. This is the persecution. I told a couple of minutes ago that according to my understanding, probably the shamans practiced more freely and were not caught in masses as the monks were. But from interview I made with Bajir, the famous Darkhat shamaness, you can see that she mentioned many names who were caught and executed during the socialism. And she was lucky that she could survive, and there were survival strategies as well. And also what I mean that some shamans could practice in a free milieu is because the local community needed their services even during the socialism. There are some references, and again a very nice picture from the Devian art showing Daindir as well. And thank you for your kind attention, and I hope that everything was understandable in my Hunglish even, and I'm waiting for the questions, the doubts, or criticism, or everything you would like to ask from me. If I can answer, of course, and thank you for your kind attention.